Welcome to chest X-ray part 2. This time it is cardiology. So like chest X-ray in respiratory system that we have discussed before, the X-ray we must comment whether it is PA or AP. AP means the film is at the back and the X-ray tube is anterior. So the X-ray beam goes anterior to posterior. So when it is going anterior to posterior, the beam diverges somewhat so that when it reaches the film, there may be an apparent cardiomegaly in AP view. Lateral view nowadays people are not using because echo is far more informative, and the oblique view is possibly of yesteryear. Nowadays nobody is using it, but when it was being used, it was for barium swallow to show the enlargement of left atrium in mitral stenosis. What was taken was the right anterior oblique view, which means right shoulder is against the X-ray film, and you can demonstrate the posterior displacement of barium filled esophagus. The same thing may show left aortic arch producing a small indentation on the anterior border of the esophagus. Now, reading of chest X-ray as far as cardiology is concerned, like in respiratory, we must mention whether it is AP or PA positioning, whether it is correct or not. Those things are same. Then regarding the situs, whether the situs is solitus, or that means normal, or inversus, that we will come to. Then regarding cardiomegaly, where we do the cardiothoracic ratio to make it objective. Subjective, we can always say whether there is a cardiomegaly or not. And once there is a cardiomegaly, we will have to commit whether it is left ventricular type or right ventricular type, or cannot comment. When we cannot comment, do not make a comment at all. And then whether atria is enlarged or not. Then we must comment about the pulmonary vascularity, which is very important in cardiac X-rays. And then if there is anything special in the right or left cardiac border, or any described classic shape of the heart, then we can mention that also. Now coming to the situs. Situs depends on site of the liver. So normal is liver is on the right, stomach is on the left, that is situs solitus. Suppose liver is on the left and stomach is on the right, it is situs inversus. So situs depends on abdominal viscera, the liver. It is not depending on heart. Now look at this X-ray. It looks as though the heart is on the right side, and the right border of the heart appears somewhat like a left border of the heart. So we tend to believe that the heart is on the right side. So whether it is true or not. See, there is a evaneration of diaphragm on the left side. Normally, evaneration of diaphragm does not produce the pressure or the mass effect to push the heart to the other side. If at all it is producing, this much of evaneration is not enough. It should be like this. So it is less likely to be dextroversion due to the pressure. And second thing is the cardiac border. This border appears very much like a left heart border in a normal X-ray. So it is very likely that this is dextrocardia. If it is dextrocardia, then it is situs solitus dextrocardia, because liver is here only. Here it is stomach. So liver is on the normal side and heart is on the right side. So there comes the problem. If liver and heart are at the same side, the chance of significant complicated structural heart disease is very high, 90% above. Suppose it is situs inversus, that means the liver is here and the heart is in the normal position, that is on the left side. Again it is very dangerous, because again the chance of complicated heart disease is more than 90%. So what does it mean? If heart and liver are on the same side, the chance of complicated structural heart disease is very high, above 90%. But if it is mirror image, like situs inversus and dextrocardia, which means the liver is here on the left side, but heart is on the right side. So they are on opposite side. Then it is almost like normal. The chance of structural heart disease is minimal, less than 10%. Now this is the so-called dextroposition. See, the whole field is filled with intestine. It is a diaphragmatic hernia. So naturally it is pushing the heart to the other side. And see, this side of the heart looks more like right border of the heart rather than left border. So this is dextroposition. This is not true dextrocardia. Now here, this border appears somewhat like left heart border only. So is it not dextrocardia? Now see whether there is something pushing the heart to the other side. See, here the diaphragm, the dome is not seen. It is flattened and in fact has become concave. So a lot of pressure is being applied here, and even the lung is herniating to the other side. See, so this is possibly a congenital lobar emphysema that is pushing the heart to the other side. So in spite of the heart shape being almost like a normal left-sided border of the heart, it is still dextroposition. So whether it is dextroposition or dextrocardia depends on whether there is something to push the heart to the other side or not. Hope it's clear. Now regarding the heart borders. The left heart border, there is aortic knuckle at the top, then the pulmonary artery, then normally there is a concavity. If there is a left atrial enlargement, the appendage may jut out through that concavity, then the left ventricle. On the right side, topmost is superior vena cava, and then the ascending aorta can be visible normally also, and then the right atrium. We will come to that. See, this is the superior vena cava coming, and this is the ascending aorta going on, becoming aortic knuckle and goes down as descending aorta. And this is the pulmonary artery, and this is a concavity that is normally present, and if left atrium is enlarged, the appendage may fill this concavity. So normally this is concave. It gets filled up only if there is a left atrial enlargement. And this is the right atrium. This is the right ventricle, just beneath the left side of the sternum. So that is why in right ventricular hypertrophy we get left parasternal heave. See, it is just beneath that. And this is the left ventricle. And this is a superimposition of a heart over the X-ray to show where the right atrium is sitting and where the right ventricle is. See, this is a normal X-ray, and we will just see. See, this is the aortic knuckle. This is the pulmonary artery. This is the concavity, which is normal, which will get filled up if there is a left atrial enlargement. And there is left ventricle. This is the right atrium. Right atrium ends somewhere there, and then the ascending aorta, and then it goes and becomes knuckle and comes down as descending aorta. Here the superior vena cava is not very obvious. This is the lateral X-ray. As I said before, it's not very important these days. This is the right ventricle just beneath the sternum. If it is enlarged, more of space gets in contact with the sternum. So right ventricle is in contact with the sternum. This is left ventricle. Left atrium is posterior. This is the pulmonary artery. The big artery that is branching is pulmonary artery, that is curving to become the arch is aorta. So now in the oblique view, I earlier mentioned about RAO, right anterior oblique view, and barium swallow, where if this left atrium is enlarged, it will come like this. So in that case, the esophagus will come like that, and then the barium will curve like this and then go. So then we know that left atrium is enlarged. Now that the echo has come, this has got no role and nobody does it. Now to assess the pulmonary vascularity, we have to divide the lung into three parts, like the medial third, the middle third, and the lateral third. Normally the big vessels are in the medial third, and some vessels will be seen here, and the significance of the lateral third we will come to. Generally this is devoid of much vessels. Then the upper and lower zone. This is the upper zone, this is the lower zone. There is no definite cutoff. You can always compare the uppermost part and the lowermost part. Why? Because of the gravity, there will be less of blood stagnation here as compared to here. So this is more opaque normally, this is more loosened normally. Now cardiac enlargement, basically ventricular enlargement. Subjectively we can always have a look and say, but objectively we can calculate the cardiothoracic ratio. In the newborn, more than 60% is cardiomegaly. Infant and very young child, more than 55% is cardiomegaly, and older child and adult, more than 50% is cardiomegaly. This is slightly different from what is given in textbook because I find it easier, 60, 55 and 50 easier to remember. And what is meant by right ventricular contour? It is an upturned apex. The apex is lifted up from the diaphragm. And second thing, the left border may get straightened. That we will come to when we discuss mitral stenosis. Left ventricular contour means apex is down and out with rounding off at the level of the diaphragm, which means it goes down. This is how we measure the cardiothoracic ratio. The largest measure on the right side from the midline, and the largest measure or the longest measure from midline to the left border. Add these together, this is the cardiac, and from the inner border of the rib you calculate the thoracic, and then compare this to have a ratio. So that is how you calculate cardiothoracic ratio. Microcardia hardly ever we see. It is generally 10% less than the standard. For example, in an adult, 50% is the standard, so less than 40% is microcardia. In children, depending on whether it is whether the cutoff is 60 or 55. Now it is seen in severe PEM, it used to be, and Addison's disease and apparent microcardia, which means the heart appears to be suspended linearly because of hyperexpansion of lungs. Apparent microcardia, and this is an example of apparent microcardia. See, the diaphragm is flattened and so many ribs are seen. So it is an overexpanded lung. There is a pneumonia, that is another thing. So by measurement you will find it is microcardia, but you will have to use our other findings also before committing whether it is microcardia or an apparent thing. Now there are certain classic shapes described: boot-shaped heart in tetralogy of Fallot, egg-on side or egg-on end appearance in TGA, figure of 8 appearance, scimitar sign, and globular heart. We will come to one by one. This is the so-called upturned apex. See, it is lifted up from diaphragm like the tip of a boot. So apex is elevated from the diaphragm. Pulmonary artery is inconspicuous, and pulmonary vascularity is, see, it is very translucent. Pulmonary vascularity is very reduced. Even the main pulmonary descending branch is not all that obvious as compared to the normal. So this is typical X-ray of tetralogy of Fallot. And this is with some imagination, suppose you cut this off, some imagination it looks like an egg. But it is having some other issue causing hyperexpansion of the lung, and egg-on end appearance is typical of TGA. But here one thing that is odd is in TGA we expect a lot of vascularity here. Here I am not finding much vascularity. Whether it is an X-ray artifact due to penetration, we do not know, but this was a case of TGA. Now this is the so-called figure of 8 or snowman appearance, typical of TAPVC. Here this is the superior vena cava that is bulging out. This is the so-called vertical vein that is bulging out. And what is this vertical vein? All the pulmonary veins join together to form a common pulmonary vein which drains into this vertical vein. And this vertical vein drains into the superior vena cava through the brachiocephalic vein, which is behind, somewhere here. So this is the vertical vein, this is the superior vena cava, and that drains into the right atrium. So this is the typical appearance of figure of 8, which is otherwise called snowman appearance. So the components are, this is superior vena cava, this is vertical vein, and this is the upper bulge of 8, and this is the lower bulge of 8. Lower bulge of 8 is the normal cardiac structures. Yeah, this is the so-called scimitar sign. Pulmonary vein rarely drains into the inferior vena cava here. So it shows itself as a shadow, something like this descending pulmonary, a little less dense than this, and goes like this and blurs out here. So that is how it normally appears. So because of this shape, it is called scimitar sign. But the scimitar is generally less clear than this descending pulmonary artery. So don't go with the impression that it will be as standing out as this scimitar. This is just to show how it looks like. Now next is the globular heart. See, a very huge heart. The usual causes of globular heart, huge heart need not always be globular. See, pericardial effusion is the classic example. Then dilated cardiomyopathy and myocarditis. Both are more or less same X-ray wise. Only thing is myocarditis is an acute event. Dilated cardiomyopathy is an event that has been going on for a long time. And the Epstein anomaly, where you have a huge heart. We will come to. See, this is the typical pericardial effusion. See, globular heart and a narrow pedicle. See, the fluid is filling up right up to the reflection of the pericardium into the great vessels. And see, the borders are pencil sharp. See, as though it is drawn with a sharp pencil. Why is it so sharp? Basically because the fluid filled heart, which means the heart contractions do not reflect here. Here it is fluid. And the pericardium that is bulging out under tension. So it looks sharp. In a normal heart, because of the cardiac contractility, there will be minimal blurring of cardiac borders, minimal blurring. That is normal. This sharpness is not normal. This sharpness. Yeah, this is again a huge heart. Can it be pericardial effusion? Yes, can be. Can it be cardiomyopathy? Yes. But then see this right atrium, it is huge. So huge right atrium is generally part of Epstein anomaly. Why is it so? Because the tricuspid valve gets attached lower towards the apex of right ventricle, which means right ventricle becomes small and part of the right ventricle has now become part of right atrium. So atrium becomes very big. So this is a big atrium, huge heart, typical of Epstein anomaly. And Epstein anomaly, the tricuspid valve, because it is abnormally placed, there usually will be tricuspid leak also. So the most common cause of congenital tricuspid regurgitation is Epstein anomaly. And of course many conduction blocks will be there, PR interval will be abnormal, WPW may be seen, and RBB may be seen. So in fact in Epstein you hear so many heart sounds, not instead of 2 or 3 you hear so many heart sounds. Now what are the evidences of right atrial enlargement? Prominent convexity on the right lower heart border, because right upper heart border is because of the vessels. Right atrial shadow occupies more than 2 spaces vertically, and right atrial border from midline more than 5.5 in adult. In pediatric, I am not aware of any cutoffs, but what we do is if more than 1/3 of heart shadow is to the right, we can take it as right atrial enlargement, because normally not more than 1/3 of heart shadow is expected to be to the right of midline. See, here more than 2 spaces is occupied by the right atrium, and the bulging out appearance, that is maybe some 4 or 5 centimeter from the midline. So this is evidence of right atrial enlargement, but we should use our common sense, because it could be a huge, for example, pericardial effusion, where again you can measure from we will go back to the pericardial effusion slide. Here you should not commit it is right atrial enlargement. This is pericardial effusion. If you measure, there will be 5-6 centimeters. So we must use other findings also before giving an opinion. Left atrial enlargement, shadow in shadow on the right side, that is within the shadow of right atrium there is another shadow which actually is left atrium. Prominent left atrial appendage on the left heart border below the pulmonary bulge. Widening of carinal angle and elevation of left bronchus both are possible, but rare and difficult to pick up in an ordinary X-ray. See, this is just to show how the left atrial shadow will appear. See, this is the right atrial shadow, and inside that you will have another shadow, and this area will be more dense than this area. So, it is not that left atrium will appear like a line like this, no. There will be more density up to this line, and this area will be less dense. So, this area will be right atrium and this area will be left atrium. And another evidence of left atrial enlargement, we can't see aortic knuckle and the pulmonary artery, both are merging together. So, pulmonary artery is hugely enlarged and touching the other. And see, here we expect a concavity and then the left ventricle, but instead of that concavity we find a small convexity. So, this is left atrial appendage. So, if you draw a line like this, it is so called straight line, because there is no aortic knuckle bulge, no pulmonary bulge. This is if actually supposed to be concave, so it has become at level and has gone beyond that as a bulge. So, this is the so called straightening of heart border, which is typical of mitral stenosis. Now, pulmonary vascularity, I discussed how to assess. Upper zone is less vascular than the lower zone. Then 3 zones vertically we will divide: the medial, middle and the lateral. Now, the findings expected would be oligemia, that is less of vasculature; plethora, plenty of vasculature; pulmonary arterial hypertension, which can go on to Eisenmenger clinically if there is cyanotic; and pulmonary venous hypertension. We will see one by one. See, this is the typical pulmonary oligemia, possibly a tetralogy of Fallot because the apex is lifted up. And see, even the main pulmonary branches are less obvious than normal, and here there are hardly any vascular markings. So, this is pulmonary oligemia. Vascular shadows are very sparse. Whatever is seen is in the middle third only. This is pulmonary plethora. See, normally also compare the upper zone and lower zone will be more opaque, because by gravity here more blood will stagnate as compared to this area. But here the problem is, see, this lateral part appears as dense as the medial part. That is not expected. This should be less dense. So, this possibly means that this is a case of increased vascularity, and the pulmonary right descending pulmonary artery is quite big. Pulmonary artery is bulging out here, and here possibly a left atrial appendage is also there, because we are not really finding the concavity. Now, pulmonary venous hypertension. What are the features? Cephalization, which means the upper zone vascularity is equal to or more than the lower zone. Normally, the upper zone vascularity must be less because the gravity drains to the lower zone. But here, for example, in mitral stenosis, the pulmonary veins are draining to the left atrium, and the mitral valve is tight, so it cannot go into the left ventricle. So, there is back pressure. So, against gravity, there is vascular engorgement. So, that is the so called cephalization. Then you have the curly B line, curly A line, etc. These are actually interlobular septal connective tissue engorgement. And lastly, pulmonary edema. We will come to one by one. This is the so called septal lines. See, there are lines from hyla going slanting lines. These slanting lines are called curly A lines. The horizontal line is called curly B line, these things. And suppose the curly B is crossing the curly A, then it becomes crisscross, and that is called curly C line. So, generally what is mentioned is curly B line. All are having the same significance only. And seeing this X-ray, we may think whether it is a pneumonia or an interstitial pneumonia. But then this is the heart border. Now look at this pulmonary vessel, it is huge. So whatever is happening here is because of the pulmonary circulation, and that's why we are discussing it as curly lines. And this is the clavicle, this is the upper zone. See, there are many vessels clearly seen in the upper zone. Normally less will be seen. It is not that number of vessels will be more in pulmonary venous hypertension, no. It is the size that increases because it accommodates more blood. So many signs are names are given. For example, inverted mustache sign of mitral stenosis of ester years, and more commonly the stag's antlers, that is horns of deer, like branching horns of a deer. So those are all the descriptions given for the prominent upper lobe veins that is typically seen in pulmonary venous hypertension, in clinically most obvious in mitral stenosis. And this is a X-ray of an acute nephritis patient who was who became dyspneic and was started on cefotaxime, and I was called in to see. So this is typical pulmonary edema. This is expanding from the hilum towards the periphery. Then you may be wondering, where is the curly A line, where is the curly B line, where is the cephalization? So it is this cephalization or the curly B lines or the increased engorgement of vessels, those takes time. Overnight it doesn't happen. So it happens in, say, mitral stenosis. But in an acute event like this, there is no time for all those things. The fluid simply leaks out, and that's what is happening. So it is not that there is cephalization of vessels, there is curly lines and then pulmonary edema, no. Now here you can see a huge pulmonary artery, huge, and the medial third, it is full of shadows. So the pulmonary main vessels are all big. And compare the lateral part of this X-ray, that is as lucent as the apex, which means somebody having this much of vascular shadow here must have some shadow here also, which is not happening, which means there is a peripheral pruning. So this is pulmonary arterial hypertension, and if the child is cyanotic, then could be Eisenmenger also. This generally happens in left to right shunt conditions if it is left untreated. After some time, the body has got to come into action to restrict blood flow into the pulmonary circulation, which it does by constricting the pulmonary vessels. And once that happens, that is called pulmonary arterial hypertension, which with structural modifications of the vessels. Then it becomes irreversible and inoperable. Now suppose, imagine these things are all normal, there is no shadow here, but only this thing. See, there is a heart, there is a big pulmonary, and then a normal sized heart like this. Then there are two diagnoses. One is an idiopathic dilatation of pulmonary artery, where we do not know the cause and the child is totally asymptomatic. And post-stenotic dilatation in pulmonary stenosis. Pulmonary stenosis also the child can remain asymptomatic, but the stenotic jet will hit on the vessel and produce a dilatation. So those are the two differential diagnoses if these things are not there. A normal heart, asymptomatic child, but a prominent pulmonary. For that differential diagnosis will be idiopathic dilatation of pulmonary artery and post-stenotic dilatation of pulmonary stenosis. Now we have almost finished all the components of X-ray reading. Right. So we'll proceed to the next session. Left to right shunts. Actually, left to right shunt per se cannot be diagnosed by X-ray alone. That is a fact. So we need the history, we need the ECG, and then combine these things together and give a diagnosis. So common to all means ASD, VSD and PDA. Those are the common left to right shunt conditions. Common to all would be cardiomegaly, pulmonary plethora and prominent main pulmonary artery. And then how will you differentiate these three? ASD, there is no left atrial enlargement. What is enlarged is the right atrium and right ventricle. PDA, left atrium is enlarged plus dilated aorta, which means ascending aorta or the aortic arch. And because both the pulmonary artery and aorta are enlarged, the gap between those two disappears and it appears as a single line. And in VSD, there is left atrial enlargement but no enlargement of aorta as compared to PDA. In ASD, generally the X-rays will be normal. We need the clinical wide fixed second sound and ECG finding to diagnose. If somebody tells us that this is a X-ray of left to right shunt and what it could be, then only can we commit with that it could be ASD. For example, the pulmonary is prominent. This heart border appears more rightish than leftish. There is a tendency for a lifting up. And right atrium is prominent but possibly not fitting it with the criteria. It is not very enlarged. And the pulmonary, right descending pulmonary artery is quite prominent. So if it is a left to right shunt condition, then it could be ASD. Suppose somebody tells us what is this? You can see the clips here, no? So it is possibly a post-surgical case. So if it is a left to right shunt condition, again you can see this is the aortic knuckle and this is the pulmonary is prominent. And the left atrium is not enlarged. See, left atrial appendage is not seen. And this is the left ventricle shadow. And the apex, there is nothing to comment. It is neither left nor right, but possibly towards a rightish. And here there is no shadow in shoulder. So this is a left to right shunt condition where there is no left atrial enlargement. So it could be an ASD post-operative case. Again, suppose somebody tells us that this is a left to right shunt condition and where will you place it? Then we can see that the aorta area is quite prominent than normal, and heart actually it's more rightish. So it is a small infant, so maybe the newborn right ventricular predominance has not regressed enough, and there is a shadow in shadow here, so possibly left atrium is here. So if somebody tells us that this is a left right condition, then it is a left to right shunt with left atrium and aortic dilatation. So it could be PDA. This is suppose a left right shunt condition, huge pulmonary artery and appears to be a left ventricular enlargement. Right atrium is not very prominent and big right descending pulmonary artery. So this is a case of left to right shunt with without a right atrial shadow or any conspicuous aortic. So possibly it is VSD. So again I reiterate, with X-ray alone we can only say it is a left to right shunt. We cannot say whether it is ASD, VSD or PDA except in a few typical. Now the rheumatic mitral stenosis, left atrium and right ventricle is enlarged. Why? Because the block is at the mitral valve. So from left atrium blood cannot go into the left ventricle. So there is a back pressure, pulmonary venous hypertension, there is a protective pulmonary arterial hypertension, hence right ventricular enlargement hypertrophy. So these are the features of rheumatic mitral stenosis, where in X-ray you will find cardiomegaly, main pulmonary artery, prominent main pulmonary artery branches, but lateral third devoid of branches because of the pulmonary hypertension. Cephalization of pulmonary vasculature because there is pulmonary venous hypertension, because both these things comes together. There is a pulmonary venous hypertension because of the block at the mitral valve. And because there is pulmonary venous hypertension, the body protects against further flooding of the pulmonary circulation by going into pulmonary arterial spasm and pulmonary arterial hypertension. And pulmonary edema can occur especially after exertion. The splaying of carina and elevation of left main bronchus, I already said, is hardly ever noticed. Left atrial appendage may be seen on the left cardiac border. And if a barium is done, it is not done these days. If barium is done, then there will be posterior esophageal displacement. Left ventricle will be either normal or small because the mitral stenosis, less blood is coming to the left ventricle. So there is no reason for left ventricle to enlarge. So this is a typical mitral stenosis X-ray. See, the pulmonary is big and the gap between aorta and pulmonary is filled up. And see, there is a small bulge which is the left atrial appendage, and the cardiac border appears a little bit elevated. So it could be a rightish heart border, rightish ventricular enlargement. So it is the so-called straightening of the left heart border. Right atrium is not much enlarged. Left atrium is not very conspicuous here. Actually, it must be enlarged. And the vasculature in the medial third is more prominent, and the lateral third is sparse. Mitral regurgitation, there is left atrial and left ventricular enlargement. See, cardiac enlargement is there. Main pulmonary artery is prominent, and actually we expect a slight dip here. This dip possibly is not there, and then left ventricle. It is sort of rounding off here. So this is indicative of one, cardiac enlargement, second left atrial enlargement, and left ventricular enlargement, and there is increased vascularity. So this is X-ray of mitral regurgitation. Here what you see is air around the heart, and there is a linear shadow of air behind, or rather beneath the heart. So this is a so-called continuous diaphragm sign, and the two differential diagnoses, pneumomediastinum and pneumopericardium. See, once you have this X-ray, look for air elsewhere in the soft tissue. See, there is air in the soft tissue. That means it is pneumomediastinum. Pneumopericardium, the air is within the pericardium. It will not escape into the soft tissues. So that is the easiest way to say whether it is pneumopericardium or pneumomediastinum. Pneumopericardium has gas partially or completely surrounding the heart and does not go outside the anatomical limits of pericardial reflections. That's what I said. And pericardium sharply demarcated. Why? Because there is gas inside, that is pericardial gas, and outside, that is the lung. So the pericardium stands out. And the continuous diaphragm sign can occur in pericardial effusion also, but it is more typical of pneumomediastinum. So thank you very much. Hope this session was useful.